So I think on Twitter, there's been a lot of talk about why Levidras is so broken, and there has been videos made about it, but I don't think anyone's been talking about how annoying Rezael is to play against and why it is definitely one of the top decks out there. If you look at Japan results, Rezael has just been doing very, very good. Better there than I think Levidras. But in the West so far, not that much. Now, I did make a tweet as well last year, like when the drama was going on, about how it's annoying that the new top decks at the moment really have like no counterplay because they can just do whatever they want and you can't really play around it if you have like a less than good hand compared to them. Like they just have to draw average. If you don't draw the same or better, then you just feel bad. Also, this is a going first format. So going first is just really, really strong and it really favors Rezael's playstyle and Levidras as well. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why Rezael is so good. Now, we're going to approach this from the perspective that we're playing against a Rezael player and we're going second, so they're going first. Right off the bat, when your opponent flips that starter and rides their first ride, you have to think to yourself, do I want to give my opponent 1 damage? Because they're playing Keta Sanctuary. Most Keta decks have access to what we like to call the Keta Pile, which is just the Wisdom into Teeth Felt combo. And this will lead to your opponent being able to just build up a big board and then trialing you, hitting you at like good attack numbers. So it's very hard for you to guard properly. So that's something you have to really think about. The Teeth Felt combo snowballs pretty hard. And this is basically the theme of the day, snowballing. Like Teeth Felt can search through the deck as well and get good pieces like Sergeon to boost with. So it can be very, very, very tragic in a way for you. So you have to think about yourself, do I want to give them 1 damage? Now, if you're going second, that means if you want to deny that damage, you have to not attack with your Vanguard, which is essentially a -1. But at the same time, you know, a -1 is better than like minusing 1 or 2 in your next turn and still taking like 2 damage. So that's something to consider, right? Do I want to not attack, so I deny them a damage, or do I want to attack and risk that because they might not have the piece, right? There's a chance they don't have the piece. Or they just might not play it, or you're actually happy taking the damage, right? You're happy to take all that damage because then you can convert that into something next turn or in the next couple of turns, and you have good defensive power going into their grade 3 turn, because you'll be at grade 2, by the way, so that you're happy to take that damage. So that's kind of the trade-off that you have to think. But let's say you don't attack, you -1 yourself. Let's kind of take a look at what happens on their grade 2 turn. So this is actually a pretty average grade 2 turn for a Rezael player. They commit a Kadwala and then a Sergeon. Maybe they missed with their grade 1, the Tranquilia. So they call them out. It could be anywhere. Like, it could be behind Vanguard if they want to hit a certain number. Because, of course, you want to put an Aerial Sage usually behind Vanguard. But then they could do something like this and put it here if they have the Aerial Sage already in hand. And then just play that. Or they just play like the Aerial Sage. Or they manage to successfully search an Aerial Sage, right? So we have an Aerial Sage there. So it could be like that. But in any case, the key thing is that in this lineup, they have a Kadwala here, they have a Sergeon here. They're attacking for 18 on the Vanguard circle, and this is basically not really guardable. Well, it is guardable, but it's not like efficiently guardable, which is the most important point in what we're going to talk about now, because cards are more valuable early than in the late game, which is a kind of weird way to approach it. But at the same time, you know that for the first couple of turns, you always have to discard a card to ride. And being able to have more cards in your hand to pick from is important, especially for decks like Levidras, which are very piece-reliant. You want to make sure that you're discarding the right card in order to maximize your attack next turn. If they're forced to guard important pieces early and throw them away, then they have less options to like choose for discarding. And then suddenly they might have discarded the wrong pieces. They might draw like extras of the same piece just because they just don't have the options, right? They don't have the options. So it's important to understand that in the early game, you always, basically in the whole game, you want to guard efficiently, but it's very, very important in the early game to guard efficiently. Committing like 2 cards to guard for something you generally don't want to do unless it's something like an energy cycler that you're guarding with, or you just really, really have to. But for example, like this setup is pretty annoying for you being the player on defense, because again, like the 18k Vanguard column, you're probably not guarding that, right? Unless you really want to, but that's like at least a 2-card guard. And then this side is a 23k column unless you've committed a lot more cards to make the Sergeon not valuable. But still, this is like a 23, and at the end of turn, this Kadwala is going to disappear, the Sergeon is going to disappear, and then you're forced into a 1-line column again, right? If on your next turn, when you ride up to grade 2, You have to go, do I want to give them 1 damage or not? Because if they do, then next turn, they're going to be able to, like, at least call a card with their, you know, Rezael. So again, you're forced into that decision. Do I want to keep my opponent on 0 damage, or am I fine in giving them 1 damage? And if you, again, want to give them 0 damage, if you're fully committed on 0 damaging, then, you know, you're minusing 1 again, and your next turn, your Rezael is just probably going to swing, your opponent's Rezael is just probably going to swing 3 times, right? But if you do give that 1 damage there, then your Rezael will do 4 attacks, and one of the attacks is likely not going to be big. One of them will likely just be a trigger and a Surgeon, and then that'll be it, 4 attacks. You'll probably take a bunch of damage. Now, I just want to also point out the Aerial Sage here as well. This is also very significant. Like, every Rezael deck runs some sort of countercharge option. Aerial Sage is the most common one. If you did give your opponent 1 damage earlier on your grade 1 turn, and they Wisdomed you, or they Catapult comboed you, then they have an Aerial Sage, then they're just going to smack you at grade 3, like maximum power. Well, not maximum power, but just like a decent amount of power that you're going to be so behind that that's basically how you lose, right? So these are just some of the things that you have to think about in the early game against Rezael. Once your opponent's Rezael rides up to just grade 3 Rezael, that is usually preset 5 is when they start to teeter out and you can kind of get back into the game. Because you can give them like 1 damage at the time, keep them on lower damage. The lower damage, a Rezael player hands, their offensive output kind of lowers because it reduces the quality of cards they can call from Rezael's skill. But set 5 actually changed that. In set 5, they released Vita, one of the biggest snowball cards Rezael has ever gotten. So instead of calling low quality cards with its 1 CB that it only needs, and it can always be refunded with Aerial Sage, now it can call two cards that jank, then it calls anything at once, and then it gives them all 5k. So no matter, even though those cards that he calls are bad, they suddenly become good. Well, they're not good, but they hit good numbers. And that's the problem, because you used to have a timing window when you can slowly come back into the game, but he's now just going to smack you in the face like crazy. And the Vanguard column used to be, on the Rezael side, used to be one of the smaller ones. Of course, with an Aerial Sage boost, it hits 28, but that's like its best booster. If it doesn't get that, it doesn't hit that big. But now the Vanguard column hits bigger and bigger and bigger because it gets 5k for each of those OG Rezaels in Soul. So the window where you had an opportunity to recover suddenly disappears. Now, maybe you say that the correct way to fight against Rezael then is let's just throw it all down. Let's be very aggressive as well. Make this like a 50-50 game, a coin toss, and just see who wins. But the thing is, Rezael has that defensive divine skill that lets it, well, it's like offensive and defense, right? It gets a triple drive, puts all its crits back. It makes it so its long game is very, very annoying because at the end of when you approach the end of the game, then he just pops back all its crits. But he can also pop that early to try and dig for heals or just put back a bunch of crits that he put back. He can guard early with all his crits and then put the crits back. So there's options there for the Rezael player. But also, it got a new card called Gabrielis. And Gabrielis stacks the top card of its deck, giving the player a bit of an advantage when it comes to trigger checking. But it also has like an LB4 effect, which lets him get a drive check and become really, really massive, which is really annoying, right? Something Rezael deck's getting 3 drive checks a turn while stacking the top of his deck. And the funny thing is, like, usually the 4 damage threshold for Rezael used to be kind of weak because Rezael likes being on odd damages. 1 to 3. 3 is when it can call like a 2 and a 1, which is really good. And then when it goes to 5, it calls like a 3 and a 2. But like 4 is weird because you can't call 2-2. You can call like a 3-1, but you know, it's not the best. But suddenly like 4 is really good because now your Gabrielis is active and you can call 3 cards now from Vita's skill. The weak link at 4 damage suddenly isn't there anymore. So it's weak. All the weaknesses for the Rezael deck, it's mid game where it became, you know, less strong than its early and its late-ish game. I mean, OG Rezael late game also wasn't that amazing. Like, you can put back a bunch of crits, but that was kind of it. But now, you know, it has insane late game potential. Like, your Vanguard slowly scales up, like really big Vanguard column. It can build a full board, 5 attacks immediately before like any damage threshold, really, right? Before, sure, you know, if they could always 5 attack, they just have to call like really bad front row cards. But now they can call a good column, and then a big side column. So yeah, there's just so much more for Rezael. It feels like all its weaknesses have kind of disappeared. Before, when you also played a slow game with Rezael, they had the kind of damage. They had the Nilbris to make their damage checks better, and then also just put all the crits back with the Divine skill and make a really compressed deck. But that was kind of it. But now you have the Vita, which also has the scaling Vanguard attack, which is very, very important, right? The Vanguard attack is eventually going to become so strong, or it's just going to eventually just get so much power anyway, naturally, just by turning sideways, that you're going to run out of hand. And then its quicker 5 attack call with extra power is just really, really bad for you, because it'll slow the game down by getting damage checks all the time. Will get advantage with those damage checks and slow the game down there, but they still are putting on a really, really strong offensive output towards you as well, while also being able to like just check the top deck and making sure they're getting some triggers. So just like at every point in time, the Rezael deck is very, very strong. And this is kind of one of the I guess the biggest issues with Vanguard card design at the moment. The counterplay is not there. We see them trying to implement the Persona Guard with the new set 7 stuff, which I think should be pretty cool. I want to see how that plays out. But right now, for the top decks, this is why they're so good. There's not really that good counterplay against them. I wish there was. It's kind of started with Shoujo Doji. With Shoujo Doji, they had basically just 4 attack, and then with the CB, you'll have its 5. But the moment it got that 1 CB, they could start just doing 5 attacks. But it kind of exploded more with these decks, the Levidrasses and the Rezaels, being, I think, just slightly better than their Shoujo Doji counterparts. This is like the next evolution of no counterplay offense, right? I think it's really important that Vanguard does have counterplay. Back then, it was attacking rears, slowing damage on your opponent's Vanguard, because they could then convert that CB into more offense. But there's not enough anymore. I think there should be more counterplay. So that's just my TED Talk. Let me know in the comments how you feel. Are you going to be on Rezael or are you going to be on Levidrass? That's it. All right. Bye.